we've talked about these a little bit, talking about e-revs. Similar to the diesel-electric Edison trucks, this truck and SUV by Scout is also what's called an e-rev, or an extended range electric vehicle. It's essentially an electric truck like the Rivian truck and SUV, but instead of just relying on the battery and motors, there is an onboard generator. It's a small 4-cylinder engine that you could put gas in, and it can charge up the batteries. You've probably seen on Reddit or whatever, people driving their Teslas on really long routes. Sometimes you'll see like a little trailer or some contraption on the back where they'll have like a Honda generator that is charging the vehicle, or is there just in case you run out of fuel somewhere and there's not a charging station nearby. It's basically that, but integrated into the vehicle intentionally. You basically have a generator that rides along with you, keeping the battery topped off as you drive.
And the generator is designed to be able to regenerate electricity even under, say, like 80% of your maximum predicted output. So they can tune the size and the application for these things to be as efficient as possible. It's like, I was talking with a friend of ours today and just said that, what if you had a pickup truck that could tow more than any other 1500 level pickup truck, got the same gas mileage as your little 4-door sedan gets, go 700 miles on a charge, and cost $30,000 less than an electric truck,
and has the benefits of an electric drivetrain. It has the instant torque, and
it has no range anxiety. Mm-hmm. Like, it's the best of all worlds. So,
yep. So Scout offers both. They offer an all-electric, it's the Traveler SUV and the Terra truck. And they initially pitched it as just being electric, right? So this is actually born from a partnership between Volkswagen, who owns the rights to Scout, which was a classic American SUV and farm equipment manufacturer back in the 60s and 70s. They owned the brand Scout. They revived it to make these two vehicles here. And they were originally going to be all electric. And they used their partnership with Rivian to develop the software and a lot of the lessons learned that Rivian has made along the way to create these two vehicles here. But at some point in the production cycle, they are going to start offering something they call the Harvester range extender, which is a little 4-cylinder engine that sits back around the rear axle and, again, will top off the battery. You can get, they quote, over 500 miles of range. Wouldn't surprise me if they actually end up doing more than that. But what I heard, reports suggest that more than 80% of the reservations are for the Harvester version.
That makes sense.
So that's one of these, but with the range extender.
Yeah, I saw a walk around, and apparently they're planning on putting the 4-cylinder engine somewhere in the Scout where you still have a frunk.
Yeah, it goes by the rear axle.
Which is very unconventional.
Mm-hmm. But with a EV platform, you have a lot of flexibility on packaging.
That's true.
So you just have the skateboard, the battery pack in the bottom, and the electric motors right where the wheels are. And then beyond that, you can put the engine wherever you want.
That's true. But that's exciting. Good for them. Everybody get on board the e-rev train.
So the EV-only strategy is starting to look financially dubious because a lot of people are wanting range extenders on these. Again, for all the benefits you already pointed out. Volkswagen has been rolling back a lot of their what now seem to be pretty aggressive EV timelines. A lot of manufacturers have goals to like have a certain percentage of their vehicles all electric by a certain time. I think we're now understanding that with the changes in the market demand and the regulatory climate changing, that's just not realistic. And frankly, it's not really what a lot of people want. A lot of people still want to be able to stop at a gas station for 5 minutes, fill up their car, and then be on their way for another 500 miles. And an e-rev gives you that flexibility.
The convenience of not planning ahead is what people like. And people that buy into the EV thing, myself included, go like, well, it just takes the tiniest amount of planning ahead to go like, all right, I'm going to stop at this spot and this spot instead of that spot and that spot, right? But even that is more than people want to do.
These are going to be e-revs, which are electric vehicles that technically have a gas engine. Now, I want you to think about the implications of that real quick. We've talked about this before. Dealerships. How is Scout selling directly to customer? Because their whole model is like Tesla, like Rivian, like Lucid. They can sell directly to consumer. You can go on their website, and in a couple of clicks, you put in your payment information, and you buy a car. There's no negotiating. You don't have to drive to a dealership. You don't have to talk to a single salesman. You pick the car you want, you pay for it. What a novel idea, right?
Amazing, like how we buy everything else.
Exactly. They can do that because there are, in many states, regulatory exemptions for all electric vehicles that don't have an existing dealership network. This was put in place to allow what was at the time startups like Tesla and Rivian to begin selling to customers, because there's a huge hurdle in having to set up a dealer network to even sell your cars. And so many states have added an exemption to their franchise agreements to allow these manufacturers to sell directly to customer if they're electric vehicles and they don't have an existing dealership network. But these have a gas engine.
Yeah, the Harvester models, will you not be able to buy them in certain states?
Well, Volkswagen dealerships and Audi and Porsche are all suing the state of Colorado, because the state of Colorado, like many states, this happens to be just the first one. I'm sure many other dealerships and franchises will follow suit, but they're suing the state of Colorado saying you are allowing Scout to break your franchisee agreement, because for Colorado, at least, every state's a little bit different. It allows all electric vehicles without an existing dealership network to be sold directly to customer.
This does have an existing dealership network because they can go through Volkswagen.
As much as I despise dealerships and I think they shouldn't exist, they're kind of right. As far as the letter of the law is written, it's hard to say that this is an all-electric vehicle when you can fill it with gasoline.
Right.
And that they don't have an existing dealership network when there's nothing stopping them from selling them at Volkswagen dealerships. So again, I despise dealerships, but the way the law is written, they kind of have a point. Now, I think the law should be rewritten to allow any vehicle to be sold directly to customer. In contention that the dealerships are posing, it's hard to say they're wrong. I mean, they're right. This isn't an all-electric vehicle, and they do have the means to sell it at dealerships. Now, some people might be confused, like, why are Volkswagen's dealerships like getting mad at Volkswagen? But they're not actually the same thing. You worked at a dealership. How does that relationship work?
So let's say the Chapman Group here in the Valley, they own Chapman Volkswagen or Chapman Dodge or Chapman Hyundai or Chapman whatever, right? Basically big clients for a given manufacturer. The dealerships, especially ones that have a lot of locations and make a lot of sales, have a good amount of pull with manufacturers, and the manufacturer wants to keep the dealerships happy. Otherwise, if say Chrysler's doing a poor job, no, Nissan is a great example of doing a poor job managing their relationship with dealerships, then some of these dealerships might just decide to stop selling Nissans. They just sell out of the inventory they have, and then 3 months later they put up a new sign, and there's now all of a sudden they're selling something more successful, Dodge products.
More successful than Nissan, sure.
Fundamentally, their dealership could sell any other type of car.
You see a dealership existing and it's got lights on and it employs people. All of that money is the extra money you and I are paying for on top of the base price of the car, because obviously the dealership buys 100 vehicles at once and they get a certain rate for it, but that's not what they sell it to you for. They sell it to you for whatever they need to in order to stay financially viable.
MSRP plus some amount normally.
If one manufacturer was able to sell directly to customer and bypass the dealership entirely,
they could undercut the cost.
They could undercut the cost in a way the dealership is not going to be able to do. They won't be able to match the price of a Scout with a vehicle the dealership is selling, because the dealership has to take their cut. So obviously they're upset. Now, I don't think Scout specifically is going to make any one dealership go bankrupt, but I think they're afraid of the direction that this might be going.
They don't want people to be able to save that money. They want to be able to keep taking it. The reason it's set up this way is because it's effective. Think of all of the money that goes into everybody's pocket there.
That's money. If the dealership didn't exist, you wouldn't have had to spend on top of the price of the car.
Right. You could get the price of the car and not pay all of those people's salaries.
They'd have to go do something useful, productive.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, heck, they could just be a manufacturer-specific service center.
The other piece of this is dealerships are politically, the dealership network are politically very powerful. They spend a lot of money on election campaigns.
Your money. You didn't have to spend.
Yeah. Trying to make sure they continue to exist. Depending on what happens with the Scout, these two vehicles, the Traveler and the Terra, this could be kind of an inflection point where people finally start to be like, okay, what is the practical difference between buying this vehicle online at my own leisure in my own home versus any other vehicle that I have to go to a dealership for? Like, what is the point? Like, I think at a certain point, people are going to be like, why do I need to go to a dealership? And if enough people start asking their elected officials that.
Do you know why I think you're wrong?
Why that won't happen?
What kind of purchase is a vehicle purchase? You would like to think it's a practical one, but it's not. It's an emotional purchase.
For Americans, it is.
For Americans, it's an emotional purchase, right? if you buy something on the internet, is it going to have the same visceral draw to you as something that you are actually driving yourself at a dealership? Are you going to feel as pinned to the idea when you could easily just close the browser? Whereas at a dealership, you'd have to actually leave and talk to the salesman about how you don't want to buy it, and you have to do all this stuff, and you have to engage in some amount of conflict. Online, you could just close the browser.
There's no pressure.
There's absolutely no pressure. People want the impulse buy. They want the emotional purchase. And that's why I think that they're not going to be clamoring to go like, I want to buy online. What do I need a dealership for, when they continue to just go to the dealership anyway?
I'm not advocating for, although I think it would be a net benefit, I'm not advocating for dealerships to be abolished. I'm just saying I
don't hate the idea.
I want consumer choice.
Right.
If you want to buy it directly from the site, you should be able to. Now, there's a certain number of people that would prefer to go to their local dealership that their dad bought their car from, and they want to go to that service center, and they want to go do it in person, have that process in person. That does not resonate with me whatsoever. That makes no sense to me at all. But for that person, maybe a dealership makes sense. Now, I can see dealerships dwindling if a certain number of people can bypass dealership entirely, especially when you're like, okay, you have two identical vehicles, and one can be bought online, and one is bought at a dealership, and it's 10 grand more or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's going to be, for me, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, the franchise laws are there to protect dealerships from manufacturers doing that in the first place, which made sense when a manufacturer could not communicate across the country instantaneously. But you can now.
Yeah, that's why the dealership model has shifted away toward trying to earn money on car pricing initially, and they try to get their money on accessories and subscriptions and service, because you can price shop so easily now. A dealership previously can list a car for something, and unless you had a newspaper in your hand at that exact moment, how do you know if that's a good price or not? There's no Google. There's no cars.com. There's no Edmunds. You don't have a smartphone.
You'd have to be at this car buying process for a long time and really look at the car you're going to buy and look at pricing trends and all this stuff.
It's a very high level of effort to shop a deal in 1976 versus 2026.
Yeah, it's much easier to find a good deal.
Because people can they won't even show up at your dealership if your prices are too high. So now you're seeing a lot more uniformity in pricing of the vehicle, which means they're not making a ton of money off the vehicles. Instead, they have to make money off of the back end.
Whatever else they could scam out of you, yeah.
Yeah. I'll be watching this, not just because I like that this is an EREV, but because I'm curious to see what's going to happen with the dealerships.